So before we go very far even into the service layer, inside models, there's one item that we need to have also here, that is repository. So we'll just have under repositories, we just have one user repository. This one now will enable us to interact with the database, rather writing the statements and queries to go to the database. So I'll say it's user repository under repositories directory, or rather package. So this repository, because we are using JPA, we just say this repository dot extends JPA repository. And then in here we now need to define which model that we were using. So let's say the model for this repository is user, which will come from our model. And then also after that, now we need to say that our primary key, was it in the data type of our primary key, which for my case was an integer. Then after that, you need now to annotate this with JPA repository annotation there. And then now in here, so this one needs to be an interface, not a class, sorry for that. So you can just say this is an interface that extends JPA repository here. So when creating, you can just say create, and then you set it as an interface, rather not a class. Yeah, so that's it for there. So we'll have one query here which will say is an optional. So this one will be an optional. Okay, so we have an autofill here, but this one is trying to override. So you can just say optional user, and then find, instead of find by ID, you just say find by email, because our email is the initial one, and then string email. So with this one, you can be able to pull the user by their specific email, and that's it for the repository. Now let's go to the services. So even before we spin up our services, we'll have two directories here. The next one will be for, you can have a package for controllers, and so this is what will be controlling our APIs. So let's first let me show you how now we'll create our REST APIs in terms of the two controllers. So the first one, I'll just call it auth controller, or authentication controller. And so this one will have first I'll say this one is a RESTful REST controller. So this one will always have our APIs, but before then we can now give it some root path to just separate it or make it different from the rest of the controller. So I'll just come here and say request mapping, and then I'll say I want it to be /API /auth. So this one will go to auth. So the same I can do for the user controller, which is the second controller that we can have. I just come here and say user controller, and whichever other controller that you'll be having. And then in user controller, you can put the same, but now here you say API /users, stuff like that. Then inside now, for example, our auth controller, this is where now we need to define our APIs. So for example, I have the one for register, so it will be a post mapping, and then it will have /API /auth /sign up or register. You can even say it's register. So you can just say /sign up or register, and then this now will go to a function public. So let's say we return, if you want to say, for example, you want to return a string, and maybe call this register, and then maybe inside register, because this is a post mapping, so definitely it will have a request body. So you can just say request body, and then here you say request. Maybe it will be a string of a request, yeah, something like that. Then you just say request here, my request here, and then once you get your request, so let's say we want to just pick this request and maybe output it in our let's say we want to output this one here in our output, and then that's it, and then we can just return request, for example. So you just pick a string, and then we'll return a string. So you can just run this to try and test this. Let me see. So this one should go to sign up. So we'll create all for the logging. We'll create another one for register and stuff like that. So I'll spin up my app and just check this one in a second. So one little problem that we had here was, so in this web, we had imported web MVC. So you need to change this. It's supposed to be starter web. So that is one of our problems. So if you change that, then you are able to run your app. So you can just run this app, and then I test this endpoint of mine for sign up. So this is the first one. So now here, this is where your HTTP client now come into play, whereby you can now use your HTTP client. I can try this JCL 881 out sign up, and then I'll just say this is a post. Then I'll just post something here. On the body, I can just use JSON. Then I just say test, and then I see what will go. Could not send endpoint to auth sign up. Let me see. So I said API auth sign up, and then the request is a string auth sign up, and then our port. What is our port? 881. So that one should be able to go. And it's a post request. So let me see. Is it not going? Let me just try this new test client and see. Okay, so we can create the second one for profile. We see if now I'll use profile get mapping, and then profile. I just say get this one without anything, and then I just say here it's profile. Just test it out and see if everything is okay. So I'll just rerun this, and then it should at least give me a lead if I can use this. So these are just a plugin that I was just trying to use. Let me just see if I can add a new draft here and say this is get localhost 8001, then API auth, then profile. Yeah, we called it profile. Let me see. Yes, API / profile. So it needs to be this way. Then let me see. So you can just, this is a get. Let's try with a get and see. So this you can use the Postman, the Insomnia, or whichever other endpoint that you had. So let's just try this and see. Not going. Let me check. Yeah, so this one won't work because we haven't configured. Since we're using Spring security, we haven't configured any configs to exempt these particular routes that I'm trying out here, like sign up, profile, and stuff. So we need to define the public routes, and so first we can declare these as public routes. But for that, we need to create a configuration file here, and then we override some of the functions that we are having. So I'll just say security config here, security config inside the configs file. And then in here, this is where I'll need to configure some of the security in terms of what routes that I need to filter out, or rather what routes I'm supposed to authorize and also leave my requests going without a token. So first, I'll say this one is a configuration file. I just add that, and then I'll here enable web security. So I just say enable web security in here. And then after that, I'll just come in here. So there are two items that I'll need to declare. First is authentication provider, and the second one is a filter for JWT filter. But before then, let me first create a bin to try and enable my public URLs. So I'll say security filter chain. Security filter chain. So this is the chain that will be filtering our HTTP requests, and then here I'll say HTTP security, HTTP security, HTTP. I can call it HTTP security or HTTP, and then just open and close. Yeah, so like this. And then so in here, this is where I'll need to use this HTTP security. That maybe say CSRF. This is just to disable CSRF to disable it. So this is what I take, and then I say CSRF dot disable CSRF dot disable. So that one disables the CSRF. So plus a number of configurations that we want to do here. So I'll just say the second one is authorization HTTP request, authorize HTTP request. So I'll just pick an object called auth, and then I'll say auth auth dot first. This one will have to have the auth request. So I'll need to set some items in here. Say the request the request matcher first to just match my request. So I'll say anything to do with API /auth / anything like this one. This one should be permitted, so I'll say this one will permit all, and then any other request that is not that, I'll just say authorize this. I'll want it to be authenticated. Yes, so that one will authenticate all my requests that are not with auth. Then in here I'll just say session management, then I'll pick the session here. So these are just some more setups. Pick the session here and say session dot, so this one I can put it down and say dot session creation policy, and I'll say this one is session creation policy dot stateless, to just ensure that now we don't carry session from one service to another, so we'll put it as stateless for our requests. And then finally I'll have authentication provider, which I'll say is authentication provider. And so what these ones needs to, so this authentication provider, I'll need to define it up there to just add it. Then I'll add filter before so I'll add this filter before JWT authentication filter. Also that filter I'll add it because you need to do that filter again. Then password authentication filter, I think dot class. I hope that is it. And then I'll close my configuration. So these two items that I need to define up there, and also these are the error. Yeah, so after this I'll need to return something. That's why it's complaining, because I'll need to return this security dot. After I've built this item, then I'll need to return it. So let's create these two filters here. So the first one will be private. So now authentication provider will be our first one, which comes with Spring Security, and then the second one is JWT authentication filter, which will need to do a middleware of the same. So you just come here and do this JWT filter. So you can decide to put it in a filters folder, in a middleware folder, or whichever folder that you want. So for me, I'll just say here, I'll just come here and create a package. Then this package, I'll just say it's middleware, middleware package, middlewares. So that will create these middlewares, and then I'll create these JWT filter, or you can even call it filters. For me, I'll just use that. Then I'll create this filter here. Then we'll come back to code this filter. But for now, let's have this filter now declared here, JWT filter from there. And then we'll just say that filter is equals to JWT, that filter that we had imported there down. Then the second one was authentication provider, and this one is in Spring Security, so that provider. But also notice about the authentication filter, it's here. Yeah, so why is it complaining? Required filter, but okay, so it's because now we need to extend these and stuff. Yeah, so this one is added before trying to check the username, and stuff. So we first add our filter to be able to just extract that token, and so we will go back and code our filter in the same way. So in this JWT filter, a number of items need to be sorted. For example, we need to set where we are picking now the bearer token from the authorized body and stuff. But for now, let me see if we can first skip this for now, and then we just have this, and then we try our endpoint and see if now we are allowed to do sign up before we can add all these other items. So I'll rerun my app. Let me see, there's a problem somewhere. So it's complaining about JWT. So let's create some couple of keys that we want to use, that JWT can still use, so that it doesn't use the default. So just come here on my config and say security JWT, then I'll just say secret key. So this one, at least you need to create a base 32, or rather you need to create a longer a secret key that is valid to be used by the JWT. So I'll just paste what we have on our demo, but you can generate one. Then we just put some expiration time. This one will take 1 hour, which is, this one is in milliseconds to expire. Let's see if that was a problem.